we decided we're not going to make this film.
No chance for us to win this war. It became a different kind of war, a war of attrition. And one regret in First Blood is that I should never have worn a tank top. We definitely should have worn Gore-Tex.
Released in 1982, First Blood presented moviegoers with an action hero who would become an essential figure in pop culture for decades, John Rambo. The narrative begins with a Vietnam veteran, psychologically scarred by the conflict, returning home. Instead of receiving a warm embrace, he encounters only isolation, displacement, and constant anguish. Upon his arrival in a small town, Rambo finds himself in conflict with Sheriff Will Teasle, a figure of authority marked by prejudice. Rambo's unkempt appearance is enough for Teasle to chase him out of town like an unwanted vagrant. When the animosity escalates beyond control, a devastating conflict erupts. The entire local police force and National Guard mobilized to track down a solitary figure, a man whose military training made him the ultimate killing machine. The sole individual capable of averting a complete disaster is Colonel Sam Troutman, Rambo's former commanding officer and paternal figure. First Blood is more than just a series of intense fight scenes. It starkly portrays the deep mental suffering of a soldier cast aside by society. This potent mixture of intense action and deep sorrow made the film a sensation upon its initial release. And would you believe that Rambo was originally written to die in this very movie? This is just one of many surprising truths hidden behind the scenes. Join me as we uncover the most bizarre and explosive revelations about First Blood, the motion picture that established Rambo as an undying legend. 1. The $15 million film that became a $160 million legend with a production budget of only around $15 million, First Blood was not initially expected to be a major success. It was considered too dark and serious, unlikely to compete with the era's glossy blockbusters. However, the expectations were entirely overturned. Upon its release, the film earned over $160 million worldwide, vastly surpassing all financial forecasts. This phenomenal success transformed Rambo from a character meant for a single movie into a global cultural figure, launching a franchise of sequels, comic books, toys, video games, and even an animated series. From its humble beginnings as a small project, First Blood developed into a cinematic landmark, establishing one of the greatest action franchises in history. 2. The iconic custom-made knife for Rambo. The imposing knife Rambo wields was not a cheap prop, but a masterpiece crafted by Jimmy Lile, a master bladesmith from Arkansas. The long blade, the serrated edge, and the hollow grip containing a survival kit, matches, a compass, a fishing hook, a needle, and thread were all designed for wilderness survival. It was more than a weapon, it was a symbol of self-reliance, representing a warrior prepared to survive in any circumstance. Following the movie's release, the knife instantly became a sensation, with countless duplicates flooding the market. To this day, the Rambo knife remains one of the most recognizable weapons in movie history. And just as a sharp blade cuts through fabric, the film, despite its modest funding, accomplished a miracle at the box office. 3. The haunting ballad that closed a decade of gunfire. In the middle of a film drenched in violence, the final element that remains in the memory is a deeply evocative piece of music. It's a Long Road, composed by Jerry Goldsmith with words by Hal Schaffer and performed by Dan Hill, plays as Rambo quietly walks into the night. The mournful melody acts as the lament of a broken spirit, concluding the narrative with silence rather than explosions and bullets. This ballad never achieved mainstream success, but it was permanently etched into the minds of viewers, becoming the emotional core of the entire film series. Later, whenever that tune returned in the sequels, audiences knew that Rambo's internal pain and tragedy were about to resurface. Alongside the music, another detail also attained legendary status, following the character for decades. 4. The Batcave was changed to a rat cave in First Blood. In the original novel, Rambo retreats to a Batcave when cornered, a dark, foul-smelling place that suggests primal savagery. However, when adapting this for the screen, the director was forced to make a modification. The reason was less artistic and more practical. Rats are simpler to manage than bats, and presented a lower risk for the film crew. Thus, the bat cave in the book became the rat cave in the movie. This seemingly insignificant change inadvertently created a powerful new symbol. The sequence where Rambo is attacked by rats and struggles in the darkness was just as haunting for audiences as the original concept and emphasized the extreme destitution he was forced to endure. And then, as the noise of gunfire faded, a melancholic song unexpectedly emerged, leaving a profound echo that lasted longer than the sound of any shot. 5. From comedy director to father of Rambo. Before directing First Blood, the name Ted Kotcheff was primarily linked to lighthearted comedies and dramas, such as Fun with Dick and Jane. No one could have predicted that he would be the one to craft such a gritty, intense, and despairing depiction of a veteran abandoned by the public. Kotcheff took on the project when all others had backed away. With his distinct vision, he transformed First Blood from a simple action film into a tragedy of psychological trauma and isolation. This bold choice stunned audiences. A director known for comedy gave life to Rambo, an enduring symbol of warfare and survival. But sometimes, even the most minor details can drastically change the entire mood of a story. 6. The National Guard gear in the film was all real. When audiences observed the slightly awkward National Guardsmen in First Blood, few realized that the military equipment they wear was entirely authentic. The film crew sourced the heavy helmets, vintage jackets, and assorted gear from Canadian military surplus warehouses. The worn condition of these items made the unit look exactly as intended. Part-time soldiers, simultaneously clumsy and inexperienced, tasked with hunting a highly trained veteran. On screen, every scuff, every faded detail of the uniform boosted the film's realism, making the pursuit sequence indistinguishable from a genuine, deadly chase. If the use of real equipment brought authenticity to the film, it was the director, the person behind the camera, an unexpected choice, who infused the entire masterpiece with its soul. 7. The script almost turned Rambo into a pure villain. Behind the scenes of First Blood, a fierce intellectual struggle took place over the fundamental nature of the main character. Kirk Douglas, who was initially cast as Troutman, advocated for adherence to the novel's themes. Rambo had to be the deranged element, a terrifying remnant of the war, while Troutman was the true protagonist, the one who executed his former pupil to save the town. This vision would have been a dark take, transforming Rambo into nothing less than a villain. However, Stallone and the crew vehemently disagreed. They insisted on portraying Rambo as a victim of societal failure, a soldier burdened by tragedy but still possessing a moral compass. If Douglas's concept had prevailed, audiences would have reacted to Rambo with fear, not compassion, and that character certainly would not have been able to serve as a symbol for millions of real-life veterans. Eventually, Douglas departed the project, and Rambo appeared on screen with an unparalleled degree of humanity. While the script debates were still fresh, another surprising behind-the-scenes detail caught viewers' attention. The military gear worn by the soldiers was not theatrical costuming, but actual battlefield equipment. 8. A bleak novel ending. That audiences never saw in David Morrell's novel First Blood, the story concludes not with Rambo's tears, but with a profoundly chilling and definitive resolution. Following days of violent conflict, Rambo is critically wounded and slowly dying. He holds his weapon and a package of explosives, intending to detonate himself for a dramatic end. However, his exhausted body lacks the strength to activate the fuse. In his final moments, Colonel Troutman, the man who trained and understood Rambo, appears. There are no words of comfort or last-minute rescues, only a single shot of mercy that rings out, destroying Rambo's head and concluding everything. Both Rambo and Teasle are dead. These two figures, representing different generations of American soldiers, fall, creating a stark and tragic picture of war and its inevitable consequences. This poignant, heavy conclusion, had it been used in the film, would likely have prevented Rambo from ever becoming the cultural icon he is today. This is why the film adaptation sparked a heated debate over whether Rambo was a hero or a villain. 9. The action movie. where Rambo never intentionally killed anyone. When you hear the name Rambo, does your mind instantly conjure up a ruthless warrior, heavily armed and determined to eliminate anyone in his path? The surprising reality in First Blood is the opposite. Throughout the entire movie, John Rambo never intentionally killed a person. The only fatality, Deputy Galt, occurred not from a direct attack by Rambo, but because Galt lost his footing and fell from the helicopter during the chase. All of Rambo's other actions were entirely in self-defense. The treacherous forest traps and the precisely aimed blows were designed to incapacitate, not kill. This was a critical distinction that Stallone passionately fought to preserve. He wanted the audience to view Rambo as a shattered individual, a human casualty of war, not a cold-blooded killer. This focus on humanity allowed viewers to empathize with Rambo, feel pity for him, and follow his difficult journey. However, in the original novel, the tragic events were far more brutal, leaving no possibility of survival for either of the central characters. 10. The ending was so dark it had to be buried forever. Can you conceive of a world where Rambo, the character who captured the imagination of global audiences, was intended to perish in the first film? The version we all know concludes with Rambo breaking down into sobs in Colonel Troutman's embrace, finally releasing the pent-up agony of a war veteran. While a somber conclusion, it hinted at a hopeful future, laying the groundwork for subsequent films. In the initial version filmed, however, there was no sign of redemption. After his violent spree, Rambo collapses, completely spent and without hope. Trembling while gripping his weapon, he effectively forces his surrogate father, Colonel Troutman, to fire the fatal shot. A single gunshot pierces the silence of the night. Rambo falls, blood pouring out, his eyes empty and then lifeless. The screen fades to black. No subsequent movies, no part 2, no enduring character, just a miserable narrative detailing a soldier destroyed by the very life he was fighting for. This scene was fully edited and prepared for public viewing. Yet, when previewed by a test audience, the entire crowd was shocked and reacted with fury. They rejected the idea of Rambo meeting such a cruel end. This fierce negative reaction compelled the filmmakers to hastily reverse course, creating a more merciful ending that left Rambo alive, injured but not defeated. That single change of heart completely altered cinematic history. Nevertheless, the film's destiny was not yet secured, as an even greater challenge was emerging in the post-production room. 11. The 3-hour cut that made Stallone want to bury the film. Few would suspect that before it became an action classic, First Blood was nearly an irreparable failure. The preliminary version of the film clocked in at over 3 hours, making it so sluggish and disjointed that the compelling tale of a veteran's struggle was unrecognizable. The tempo was erratic, the dialogue was verbose, and many parts were redundant, leaving internal viewers feeling utterly exhausted. Sylvester Stallone, who had committed his reputation to the role of Rambo, expressed his profound disappointment by saying he was ready to acquire the full rights simply to stop the movie from ever being released. He viewed First Blood as transforming from his biggest career gamble into a source of potential professional ridicule. Instead of capitulating, Stallone chose to dedicate himself to the editing suite. He collaborated tirelessly with the editor, meticulously refining every scene, aggressively removing extensive sections of unnecessary footage, eliminating lengthy conversations, and establishing a completely new pace. The final product was a film under 100 minutes long, rapid, thrilling, and pulsating with life. This courageous choice rescued the movie, transforming First Blood from an unwatchable mess into an everlasting action landmark. However, just as the production drama seemed to calm down, a genuine, real-life criminal event shook the cast and crew. 12. A real weapons heist on the set. During filming in Hope, British Columbia, a surprising crime occurred that stunned everyone involved. A transport vehicle loaded with theatrical weapons, including rifles, machine guns, and pistols, was broken into and completely emptied by thieves. The estimated value of the stolen equipment was $50,000, a considerable sum for the production at that time. The most disturbing aspect was that the props were supposedly guarded by actual military personnel. Despite the security, the thieves succeeded, turning the movie location into a bona fide crime scene. Instantly, the fictional action set became a major security concern. Local newspapers printed alarming headlines. The police started an inquiry, and the film crew worried that the entire project might be canceled. To recover the situation, the Canadian military was deployed to secure the remaining weapons, effectively turning the set into a military camp. Stallone later joked that the storage unit for the props might have been better protected than a small military outpost. Fortunately, most of the stolen weapons were eventually found, but the incident undeniably added another layer of real-life tension to the film's history. And from a different perspective, a dramatic personnel change within the cast significantly impacted the look and feel of First Blood. 13. The role of Troutman changed hands at the last minute. Could you picture how Rambo's cinematic portrayal would differ if Colonel Sam Troutman had been played by someone other than Richard Crenna? In fact, the initial selection for the role was the Hollywood titan Kirk Douglas. With an impressive career spanning films like Spartacus and Paths of Glory, Douglas certainly possessed the commanding presence to play Rambo's mentor. However, conflicts arose when he insisted on controlling the script, particularly the finale. Douglas demanded that Troutman should be the one to kill Rambo, aligning with the tragic themes of the original book. Stallone and the production team strongly disagreed. They believed that for Rambo to achieve iconic status, the character could not die in his debut film. The disagreement intensified until Douglas resigned just days before filming began. In the ensuing scramble, Richard Crenna was recruited as an emergency replacement with virtually no time for preparation. Yet, something extraordinary happened. With his composed, authoritative, yet empathetic demeanor, Crenna delivered a portrayal of Colonel Troutman that resonated deeply with the audience. A very late casting change, but it proved to be the ideal selection, steering the film in a new direction. While a key role was shaped by this unexpected twist, in another sequence, Stallone was prepared to physically endanger himself to achieve unflinching realism on screen. 14. The cliff jump. That actually broke Stallone's bones. Deep in the forests of British Columbia, the crew prepared for one of the film's most hazardous moments. Rambo, desperate to escape his pursuers, making a terrifying leap from a cliff face. Many assumed a professional stunt double would take Stallone's place, but the actor flatly refused. He announced, "If Rambo has to suffer, then I must endure that pain too." The cameras rolled. Stallone threw himself off the edge, crashing into tree branches multiple times before landing hard on the ground. The force of the impact was so severe that it shattered several of his ribs, leaving him in agony and barely able to breathe. Despite the intense pain, he gritted his teeth, pushed through, and kept filming, resulting in one of the movie's most authentic moments. On screen, Rambo's labored breathing and distressed expression are the result of Stallone's genuine suffering, without any acting pretense. If that leap cost Stallone a physical injury, a different on-set accident left an unmistakable mark on the film itself. 15. The punch. That broke a stuntman's nose on screen. In the high-tension scene where Rambo lashes out in the police station, the camera captures every move with brutal chaos, but one strike unintentionally crossed the line between acting and reality. Stallone, completely immersed in his character's rage, delivered a blow so powerful that it broke the nose of the stuntman facing him. The resulting cry was immediate. It was not a staged sound effect, but the genuine, instinctual sound of a person being genuinely struck. Rather than removing the footage, the filmmakers chose to keep the moment. It was so genuine, so visceral, that it infused the whole sequence with incredible energy. After the scene was finished, Stallone was deeply regretful and apologized, while the stuntman, holding his bleeding nose, simply laughed it off. That incident became part of the movie's lore, cementing its reputation as an unparalleled work of action cinema. And while Rambo was capable of incapacitating adversaries with his bare hands in the movie, his body count in the source material was exponentially higher. 16. The original Rambo was much colder and more ruthless. The Rambo we see on screen is a suffering veteran, a survivalist abandoned by society, yet still holding on to his humanity. However, in David Morrell's novel First Blood, the character is fundamentally different. The Rambo of the book is a stone-cold, unfeeling assassin, ruthlessly executing police officers, soldiers, and even innocent bystanders. The total number of people he kills is between 15 and 20. Rambo himself no longer keeps track. He is not the tragic figure of the film, but the depiction of a remorseless psychopath warped into a monster by his military service. If the book had been adapted faithfully, Rambo would never have been embraced by audiences, nor could he have become a positive symbol for real-life veterans. But transforming a killer into a symbol of compassion required a decade of arduous work and setbacks in Hollywood. 17. 10 years of development hell. Shortly after the publication of the novel First Blood in 1972, numerous film studios rushed to secure the rights. Yet, instead of a swift production, the project was stuck in development for over a decade. More than 18 different screenplays were drafted and subsequently rejected. One draft portrayed Rambo as a psychopath even more vicious than in the book. Another script leaned toward political commentary, satirizing American society. Many directors and major stars became attached and then detached, leaving behind a project widely regarded as too challenging and ambiguous. First Blood was passed around from Warner Brothers to Columbia, then to Colco Pictures, like a liability no one wanted to hold for long. It was only when Stallone became involved that the project found its direction. He refined the script, reducing the excessive violence, injecting genuine human emotion, and recasting Rambo as a victim of his circumstances. Out of what seemed like an impossible predicament, a new cinematic legend was born, but the process of casting the main role was equally dramatic. 18. When A-listers almost became Rambo. Can you believe that before Stallone became the inseparable face of Rambo, Hollywood's elite were considered for the role? Clint Eastwood, the stoic Western legend, Robert De Niro, the method-acting master, Al Pacino, the fiery icon, Dustin Hoffman, the versatile actor, and even the action star Steve McQueen were all approached to play John Rambo. However, one after the other, they all declined the part. Eastwood felt the character didn't suit his persona. De Niro and Hoffman found the violent script overwhelming. McQueen was deemed too old. Pacino wanted Rambo to be portrayed as a hyper-aggressive madman, a creative choice the producers would not accept. Had any of them accepted, Rambo would undoubtedly have been a drastically different character, perhaps as distant as Eastwood, as explosive as Pacino, or as introspective as Hoffman. Ultimately, fate chose Stallone, who dedicated his whole being to the role, rewrote the script, and created a singular, irreplaceable image. And thanks to this performance, Stallone was propelled into international superstardom practically overnight. 19. The first Hollywood film to hit Chinese screens. In 1982, the selection of First Blood for theatrical release in China marked a momentous turning point. At that time, the country of 1 billion people had rarely permitted major Hollywood blockbusters into its theaters. Yet, the image of a solitary veteran fighting relentlessly against injustice resonated deeply with millions of viewers. Rambo transcended the role of a movie character to become a symbol of personal resilience, perseverance, and the will to survive. The response in China was explosive. Cinemas were constantly sold out. The name Stallone was whispered everywhere, seen as a hero from the distant West. In a very short time, Stallone went from an American star to a global cultural phenomenon, and First Blood served as a conduit, helping Hollywood cinema significantly expand its presence in Asia. However, in achieving that fame, the film crew had to overcome a very real environmental disaster, a raging storm that covered the landscape in white. 20. The blizzard that turned the set into a nightmare. The production team selected Hope, British Columbia, for its location due to its untamed and desolate scenery, which was perfectly suited to First Blood's somber atmosphere. However, the weather proved uncooperative. An unexpected blizzard swept through, paralyzing the entire area. Vehicles became trapped, equipment froze, and crew members were isolated in their hotels for days. The entire filming schedule was disrupted, and many scenes had to be adapted or postponed, placing extreme stress on the team. Yet the adversity offered an unexpected benefit. The intense cold, the thick ice, and the mountain's vast, solitary feel became a visceral part of the film's texture. On screen, Rambo is seen struggling against a freezing, oppressively isolated landscape, all thanks to that frightening snowstorm. Even in that bone-chilling environment, Stallone chose to maintain his character's essential humanity. A man who deliberately avoided taking a life. First Blood deserves recognition as the dark jewel of the action genre, a film where violence and tragedy merge to create a powerful and lasting impression. The movie delivers not only relentless tension, but also highlights the psychological anguish of an individual rejected by his own society. Stallone's performance as Rambo was brilliant, both fierce and deeply compassionate, securing the character's status as a timeless icon. From the score and the backdrop to the acting, every element converged to create a work that is both authentic and deeply moving. If you enjoyed these fascinating behind-the-scenes facts, please remember to hit like and share this video so more people can learn about the 20 shocking Hollywood secrets revealed. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next shocking movie stories.